Hello everyone, Bob Leaves around the world. The title of today's lesson is You Are Who Your Father Is. So there's a doctrine going around that states that you're only an Israelite if both your father and your mother is Israelite. But we're going to be seeing in today's lesson that that doctrine is not supported by scripture and does not hold water. Because the thing about it is not required for the mother to be an Israelite, for the child to be an Israelite. What is required is for the father to be an Israelite, because the seed goes through the father, and we're going to be seeing that in the scriptures today. Another thing that's interesting about the seed actually going through the father and not being dictated by what nationality the woman is a modern DNA analysis. Because in modern DNA analysis, the haplogroup is passed down from the father unto all the children, and the woman does not dictate what the haplogroup is. For example, if an Israelite man has a Korean wife, his children are going to match his haplogroup. His haplogroup is going to be passed down to the children, and they're going to have that Israelite E1B1A haplogroup. So it doesn't matter if his wife is Israel or if she's of another nation, the children's haplogroup is always going to be the paternal haplogroup of the man. So no matter if his wife is Korean, those children are going to be E1B1As. No matter if his wife is Japhetic, so-called Caucasian, they're going to be E1B1As. And then, of course, if his wife's Israelite, they're still going to be E1B1As. So even in modern DNA analysis, the woman does not dictate the haplogroup. Even if the Israelite man is not married unto an Israelite woman, the haplogroup is still going to be that Israelite E1B1A. And we're going to be diving into the scriptures today and crushing some more devil doctrine and just exposing how the woman does not dictate the seed of the children. And it is not required for your mother to be an Israelite, for you to be an Israelite. What is required is for your father to be an Israelite. Now let's get started. Okay, we're going to be starting off in Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 14. And it's in this verse where we learn that the Messiah, Yahusha, is from the tribe of Judah. And when we go to Matthew chapter 1 and verse 5, we learn that Ruth is in the Messiah's lineage. Now, this is a problem for this doctrine because the scriptures just told us that the Messiah is from the tribe of Judah. But Ruth is in the lineage of the Messiah, and she was not an Israelite. She was a Hebrew Moabite. Now, there are Israelites out there that are pushing devil doctrine and trying to say that Ruth was not a Moabite, but she was just an Israelite living in the land of Moab. But we're going to go and clear that up right now. Why Ruth could not be an Israelite. Some Israelites are now teaching that Ruth wasn't a Moabite, but was actually just an Israelite woman who lived among the Moabites. But when we dive into the scriptures, we will quickly see that this can't be the case. The first issue with this doctrine is the fact that the scriptures call Ruth a Moabitess 5 separate times, and the word Moabitess refers to a female member of the Moabite people. But that's not all, because Ruth was later called a Moabitish damsel in Ruth chapter 2. We also get another key in Ruth chapter 1 and verse 15 when Naomi says that Ruth's sister-in-law has gone back unto her people and unto her gods, and Ruth should go back with her. This shows us that Ruth is not an Israelite, because if she was, Naomi wouldn't tell her to go back into the land of Moab instead of coming back with her to Israel. Some more keys the Bible gives us that Ruth was not an Israelite is seen in Ruth chapter 2 and verse 10, when Ruth asks Boaz, the Israelite man, why he's being so kind to her, even though she's a stranger. So right here, we see that Ruth considers herself a stranger to the Israelite people. One other thing that is noteworthy about this interaction between Ruth and Boaz is that Ruth felt the need to fall on her face and bow in his presence, which is something an Israelite wouldn't feel the need to do in the presence of another Israelite. But now for the very last problem with this doctrine, and that is the fact that Boaz in Ruth chapter 4 purchased Ruth to be his wife. And we see in Exodus chapter 12, verse 43 through 51, that Israelites could purchase people from other nations, but however, you couldn't buy an Israelite. So this really wraps up everything about how Ruth couldn't be an Israelite. And down here we have Bible Encyclopedia. So Ruth was not an Israelite in any shape, fashion, or form. The scripture tells us time and time again in multiple ways that Ruth was a Moabite. Ruth was a Moabite who married an Israelite man who ended up in the lineage of the Messiah. Not only in the Messiah's lineage, but also in the lineage of King David. So according to this doctrine, the Messiah, Yahusha, and King David weren't Israelites. Because if you're saying that an Israelite woman is required for somebody to be an Israelite, that means David and Yahusha weren't Israelites. Some other big holes in this doctrine is the fact that if this doctrine were true, it would mean that we would have the 10 tribes of Israel and not the 12 tribes of Israel. Because both Ephraim and Manasseh's mother was an Egyptian. She was not an Israelite. Their father was Israelite, Joseph. So that would mean that we only have 10 tribes instead of 12 tribes, according to this doctrine. Another thing is that the Ishmaelites would not be Hebrews, according to this doctrine, because Abraham had Ishmael through Hagar, an Egyptian. So based on this doctrine, not only would we only have 10 tribes and not 12, but the Ishmaelites would not be Hebrews because Ishmael's mother was an Egyptian.
The teaching that a child's nation is determined by both parents, or specifically by the mother, matrilineal descent, runs into significant contradictions when placed alongside the clear genealogical patterns in the Bible. Likewise, the claim that Asenath was secretly an Israelite is often a doctrinal patch, used to bypass the fact that Joseph, a patriarch of Israel, married an Egyptian woman. Here are the primary flaws in those two teachings. 1. Flaws in the both parents must be Israelite doctrine. The Bible consistently defines a person's lineage and seed through the house of their father. The law of pedigree. In Numbers chapter 1 verse 18, the Israelites were commanded to declare their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers. The Bible does not ask for the mother's lineage to determine tribal belonging. The exception of the daughters of Zelophehad. In Numbers 36, a specific law was created for women who inherited land because they had no brothers. They were commanded to marry within their father's tribe so the inheritance wouldn't move to another tribe. If the mother determined the nation, or seed, this law would have been unnecessary. The mixed marriages of patriarchs. If both parents had to be Israelites, then the founders of the major tribes would technically not be Israelite under that rule. Judah married a Canaanite woman, Shua's daughter, and through Tamar, also likely a Canaanite, he fathered Phares and Zara, the primary line of the tribe of Judah and the lineage of King David and the Messiah. Joseph married Asenath, an Egyptian, and their sons Ephraim and Manasseh became two of the largest tribes of Israel. Genesis chapter 48. 2. Flaws in the Asenath was an Israelite doctrine. To avoid the reality that Joseph married an Egyptian, some teach that Asenath was actually the daughter of Dinah, Jacob's daughter, who was somehow adopted by Egyptians. There are several scriptural and logical holes in this. The priest of On. The Bible explicitly states Asenath was the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, Genesis chapter 41 verse 45. On, Heliopolis, was the center of Egyptian sun worship. If she were a Hebrew, the text would have a reason to mention her true identity, as it does with Moses being a Hebrew raised by Egyptians. The double standard problem. If Asenath had to be an Israelite for Ephraim and Manasseh to be valid, then Judah's children would be invalid because Judah's wife was a Canaanite. There is no scriptural rescue mission story for Judah's wife like there is for the Asenath legend. The prophetic meaning, the marriage of Joseph, a type of Christ, to a Gentile woman, Asenath, is often seen by researchers as a prophetic picture of the bride being gathered from the nations. Claiming she is an Israelite destroys this biblical symbolism. Scriptural silence. The story of Asenath being Dinah's daughter comes from the legendary text Joseph and Asenath and other midrashic sources, similar to the book of Jasher, not from the Torah.
Okay, we're now going to read something very interesting about the Ezra and Nehemiah situation, because there's a theory that some people push that the reason that the children were also put away in the Ezra and Nehemiah situation is because they weren't viewed as Israelites. But we're going to see that that theory makes absolutely no sense and holds no water whatsoever. Now, before we get started, I'm going to elaborate a bit more on why it makes no sense. So, in the scriptures, it's actually mentioned multiple times in the law that there's things that Israelites could do that would get them separated from the people. In other words, being an Israelite was not something that protected you from all wickedness. So if you were a wicked Israelite, there was actually things that you could do that would end up getting you separated from your people. So as a result, assuming that the reason that the children were put away in the book of Nehemiah because they weren't considered Israelites makes absolutely no sense when there was wicked deeds that Israelites could do that would get them put away. Now, let's get started. In the book of Nehemiah, in Ezra 9 and 10, Jewish men sent away foreign wives and children to preserve the holy seed, the religious and covenantal identity of Israel after exile. Although lineage was generally paternal, the children were sent away because they were not raised in Jewish faith, did not speak the language, and risked introducing idolatry, as discussed in some other source. So this is something very interesting to me, because these people, they were not dwelling in the covenant. These children were not dwelling in the covenant, okay? They did not speak the language, and there could be a risk of idolatry. So if there's ever a chance to separate an Israelite from their people, this would be it. Key reasons for this action include preventing assimilation. The children from these unions did not speak the language of Judah, threatening the loss of Jewish culture and religious identity. Preventing idolatry. The marriages were with surrounding pagan nations, mimicking the sins of Solomon, which had led to Israel's original downfall and exile. Okay, we covered that in the interracial marriage series, where we exposed the devil Ku Klux Klan doctrine that race mixing is a sin, which obviously there is no race, but the sin is marrying outside the covenant, not marrying outside your race. And we talked about how in, I think it was the book of Nehemiah, how when Nehemiah was mad at the Israelites for marrying strange wives, he referenced what happened to Solomon in regards to what they did. And when we read what happened to Solomon, it was his non-Yah serving wives that turned him away. Keyword, non-Yah serving. So that's very interesting that it was wicked foreign women that led to Israel's downfall in the first place. Okay, keyword on wicked. Covenantal purity. The seed, offspring, was expected to be holy and dedicated to Yahuwah's covenant, which was deemed incompatible with foreign, non-worshipping mothers, as explored in The Problem of Foreign Descent. The people had failed to separate from the surrounding nations, and the restoration required a strict return to purity, according to another source. Regarding the father's seed, the issue was not just physical descent, but religious training and covenant standing. Some discussions suggest they were not legally recognized marriages in the covenant sense, but rather illegal. That's a weird word, I'm going to move past that, as stated in another source. As a result, the community deemed the children part of the surrounding non-covenantal people. Okay, this is very interesting. There's a lot of things we can talk about. So, we can see that they were justified to send them away. And we also see that you being a blood Israelite does not matter if you are wicked. So if you are wicked and a threat to the nation of Israel, you will be removed. And we actually saw that with the tribe of Dan. The Most High Yahuwah literally removed an entire tribe of Israelites. It used to be 13, not this 12, but the tribe of Dan was removed. Why? Because they were wicked. So if we are to add this theory or idea that the reason that the children were sent away is because they were not viewed as Israelites, because they didn't have an Israelite mother and father, then that messes up and puts a bunch of holes in what happened with the tribe of Dan. Were they not really Israelites? Because they were a whole tribe of Israel and they got sent away. So that is a whole nother thing.